The gravel crunched under our tires as the truck slowed to a stop in front of a weathered farmhouse, its paint peeling under the weight of too many winters. My legs stuck to the cracked vinyl seat, but I didn't move. I watched my father kill the engine, then lean back with a sigh like the drive itself had drained him. My mother didn't turn around. She just reached behind her seat, grabbed the suitcase she'd packed, and shoved it toward me without looking. "Grab your things, Cale," she said. "We don't have a lot of time." I clutched the handle, my fingers already numb from the cold seeping in through the truck's thin windows. The air smelled different here, like damp soil and something burnt. I stepped out slowly. The porch creaked as we climbed the few uneven steps. They didn't say much. They rang the doorbell once, then again. My heart thudded in the space between. Behind us, wind rustled the dry grass. I looked up at my mother. Her jaw was set, eyes distant. My father adjusted his coat like he was impatient to leave. "We just need a little time to settle things," he muttered. "You'll be fine here. Your grandfather's expecting you." I opened my mouth to ask something I don't even know what, but they were already walking back to the truck. My mother paused only to pull her coat tighter. No hug, no goodbye. The engine growled to life, and then they were gone, tires spitting up dust as they disappeared down the winding road without looking back. For a long moment I just stood there, suitcase at my side, the cold crawling up my spine. In the distance, a screen door creaked. I turned. The man who opened it was taller than I remembered from the photos, lean but solid, with lines carved deep into his face. His hair was silver, pushed back messily, and his eyes took a moment before they softened. "You're Kyle," he said. Not a question, just a quiet truth. I nodded. He didn't smile, just opened the door wider and stepped aside. "Come in, then." Inside, the air was thick with the scent of wood smoke and something bitter, maybe coffee long since cooled. I dragged my suitcase across the scuffed floor, unsure of where to stop. He pointed toward the stairs. "Up there, second door on the left." "You'll sleep there for now?" I nodded again. "No, thank you." No words. As I climbed the stairs, the old wood groaned beneath my weight, and the house swallowed me in silence. The attic room was small, and the ceiling slanted in a way that made me feel like the house was trying to fold me into itself. I didn't unpack. I just sat on the edge of the bed and waited for something to happen, anything. But nothing did. The next morning, the smell of burnt toast pulled me downstairs. I found a plate on the kitchen table and a mug of cocoa beside it. My grandfather sat in the corner chair, nursing his coffee like he'd been there forever. He didn't say good morning. He just nodded once and pointed to the toast. I took a bite because it felt easier than explaining why I didn't want to eat. That became the rhythm. He'd rise before the sun, the clatter of the coffee maker echoing through the kitchen, and I'd sit quietly at the table chewing through the silence. He didn't press me, didn't ask questions, didn't mention my parents. One afternoon I watched him through the back window, crouched beside a rusted old harvester, sleeves rolled up, grease darkening his forearms. Something about the way he moved, steady, deliberate, made me open the door and step outside. He glanced up, wiped his forehead with his sleeve. "Try holding this," he said, handing me a heavy wrench. I took it, hands awkward and unsure. He showed me where to place it, how to turn it. My fingers slipped, and the tool clanged hard against the metal. I froze, breath caught. He said nothing, just adjusted the bolt again and handed it back. "Try again." I tried, fumbled, got it wrong, tried again. The bolt gave. He let out a low laugh, one that seemed to come from somewhere deep in his chest. "Well done." I didn't say anything, but something inside me shifted. Days passed. He started giving me small tasks, gathering eggs, stacking firewood, handing him tools. It was easier than talking. But the silence didn't always feel safe. One day, frustrated with a stubborn piece of wiring in the shed, I threw the pliers across the floor hard. They hit the wall and clattered to the ground. I turned, bracing for the same sharp words my father used to throw, but Harlan just looked at me calm. "You done?" he asked. I nodded, ashamed. "Then let's fix it together." And we did. No lecture, no judgment, just two pairs of hands trying again. That night, I lingered in the shed longer than I had before, watching the last light fade through the cracked window. At 12, I was still the quiet kid in the back of the classroom, the one who answered only when called on, who walked home without talking to anyone. But when Harlan found a flyer for the local high school's robotics club, he held it out to me like it was already decided. "You should go," he said. "Might learn something worth knowing." I stared at the flyer, then at him. "I don't know anything about robotics." "You didn't know how to use a wrench either." I didn't argue, but I didn't agree either. The next week he drove me to the high school gym, dropped me off without saying much. I walked inside, heart thudding, surrounded by older kids and blinking machines. I wanted to leave after 5 minutes. My hands shook when I touched the parts. Nothing I built worked. Everything fell apart. I came home one night and dropped my bag on the floor harder than I meant to. "I'm not going back," I muttered. "I don't fit in there." Harlan didn't look up from his coffee. "That's not a reason. I'm terrible at it." He took a sip, then set the mug down. "You're not terrible. You're new. That's different. Get back in the shed." I stood there unsure whether to yell or cry, but I went. And when I flipped on the light and smelled the solder and wood dust, something settled in my chest. Over the next year, we worked together nearly every evening, refining circuits, rewriting code, testing sensors. He never hovered, never corrected unless I asked. He just sat nearby, nodding, watching. And when something sparked or caught fire, we laughed instead of panicking. At 14, I built a robot that could detect trash and pick it up simple, but it worked. Harlan helped me enter it in the statewide competition. The night before the event, I couldn't sleep. He made cocoa like he always did when words were hard to find. "You've already done the hardest part," he said. "You stuck with it." I placed first. I remember standing on the gym stage holding the medal, blinking against the lights and applause. When I got outside, I called him. "I won," I whispered. He didn't hesitate. "I knew you would." That night he set up folding chairs in the backyard, baked a crooked cake, and invited the neighbors. We sat under the stars while the radio hummed, and for the first time I laughed with people I didn't feel invisible around. As I watched Harlan slice the cake, it hit me I hadn't just built a robot. I was building a life. On the morning of my 18th birthday, I woke to the sound of a familiar song playing low from the radio in the kitchen, one of those old tunes Harlan always hummed under his breath when he thought no one was listening. The smell of cinnamon and something warm in the oven pulled me downstairs. He was standing at the counter back to me, sleeves rolled, pulling a tray of cookies from the oven with a practiced ease that made it feel like any other day. But it wasn't. Not to me. "Happy birthday," he said without turning. I sat at the table. "You baked," he smirked. "Don't act so surprised. I've been doing this longer than you've been breathing." He placed the tray between us and set down a small wooden box beside it. It was polished plain, the kind of thing that looked like it carried something more important than it wanted to admit. I reached for it slowly. "Open it," he said, his voice softer than usual. Inside was a silver ring, simple but elegant. The inside band was engraved with a single word, "Legacy." I looked up, confused. "It was mine," he said. "Now it's yours." I turned it over in my hand. "What does it mean?" He sat down across from me, his face tired in a way I hadn't noticed before. "It means you need to know why you're here. Why you've always been here." I listened, heart thudding, as he told me what he'd never said before about my parents, about the forged documents, the confrontation, the decision to leave it all behind, including me. I didn't speak. I couldn't. They weren't always like that, he said. But greed changes people. I didn't tell you before because I wanted you to grow up with your own sense of worth, not weighed down by what they tried to take. You thought lying was protecting me. He looked at me, then not with defensiveness, but with something closer to sorrow. I thought waiting was. I slipped the ring onto my finger. It was heavier than it looked. You're not them, Kyle. You never were. We sat in silence, the cookies cooling between us. Later, when the fire in the living room crackled low and the house slipped into its usual hush, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, the ring pressing against my skin, and for the first time, the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt like the beginning of something I hadn't dared name. The house was too quiet the morning I found him. No radio, no coffee brewing, just stillness. I called his name once, then again, louder. The third time, my voice cracked. Upstairs, his bedroom door was slightly open, the curtains pulled against the morning light. He was lying there, arms folded across his chest, like he'd meant to fall asleep and never wake up. His hand, the one that used to guide mine over circuit diagrams, was cold when I reached for it. The funeral was 3 days later. A storm moved in that morning, low gray clouds pressing down on the valley. The rain started as we carried the casket out of the church light at first, then relentless. It drummed against the roof of the hearse as I stood by, soaked the ring on my finger cold and tight. People came, neighbors, engineers from the city. A few folks I didn't recognize in tailored suits. They spoke in low voices, eyes darting toward me like I might break. I didn't. I stood by the casket, fingers brushing the smooth wood, and tried to memorize the grain, the way the raindrops slid across it. The smell of damp earth and cheap cologne mixed in the air as the crowd shifted, murmuring. And then I saw them. A sleek black car pulled up. The door opened and Delora stepped out first, perfect hair-long coat heels that sank into the muddy ground. Mason followed, stiffer, his tie too tight against his neck. She spotted me and walked directly over, arms open like the last 9 years hadn't happened. "Oh, Kyle," she whispered, pulling me into a hug I didn't return. Her perfume hit me first, too sweet, cloying. "I've missed you." Mason nodded from behind her. "You've grown." I stayed still, heart-pounding rain dripping from my collar. I didn't say a word. They pulled me aside near the edge of the churchyard, away from the others. Her voice dropped into something softer, calculated. "We need to talk," she said, placing a hand on my arm, "about what he left behind." I stared at her, unsure whether to laugh or scream. "He would have wanted us to handle this as a family," Mason added. "You're still young. You shouldn't deal with all this alone." I stepped back. The mud pulled at my shoes, but I didn't lose my footing. "You didn't come for him," I said. "You came for the pieces." Their eyes didn't flinch. They just kept smiling. And that's when I knew they weren't leaving, not until they got what they thought was theirs. The office overlooked the river, all glass and steel and polished edges. I sat in a leather chair that made me feel smaller than I had in years. Ms. Leora Maddox. Harlan's lawyer was calm and unreadable as she placed the folder in front of her. My parents sat across from me, dressed in tailored grief, Delora in pearl earrings, Mason in a charcoal suit that still smelled faintly of travel. "Are you ready?" she asked. I nodded, though my throat was dry. My fingers fidgeted with the silver ring on my hand, the word legacy pressing lightly into my skin. Ms. Maddox began reading. The will was brief, direct. Everything, assets, investments, land, and company shares, was left to me. No conditions, no joint control, no mention of Delora or Mason. Delora laughed, soft and incredulous. "That's wonderful, Kyle. We'll help you manage it." "Of course." Ms. Maddox raised a hand. "I'm sorry, but Mr. Harlan Finch left no provision for shared management. Cale is the sole legal heir, and at 18 he is recognized as fully independent." Mason leaned forward, his voice sharpened. "He's just a kid." Ms. Maddox didn't flinch. "He's also your former ward. You relinquished guardianship 10 years ago. I have the documents here signed and notarized." Delora paled. Mason's mouth tightened, eyes flicking toward mine. "He doesn't even know how to handle this," Delora said. "This is a mistake." "There's one final detail, Ms. Maddox said, reaching into a drawer. She pulled out a small black scanner no larger than a phone. To confirm the heir's identity, Mr. Finch instructed biometric verification. My stomach twisted. I looked at the device, then at my hand. "The ring," Ms. Maddox said. "It has a subdermal chip. Mr. Finch embedded a unique code when he commissioned it." I hesitated, then slowly extended my hand. The scanner lit up. A single beep, then a green flash on the screen. "Identity confirmed," she said. Delora gasped. Mason stood abruptly, slamming his hand on the table. "This is ridiculous." That old man was paranoid. "You're manipulating his memory." Ms. Maddox opened another folder. "Mr. Finch also recorded a video message prior to his death. I'm authorized to share it only if disputes arise." Mason sat down again. Delora tried one last time. "Kyle, we're your parents. This can't be what you want." I looked at her, really looked, and for a moment I hesitated. Part of me still wanted to believe she meant it, but that part was quieter now. "I wanted you to show up when it mattered," I said. "You didn't." She didn't answer, just looked down, lips tight. When they left, Ms. Maddox touched my shoulder gently. "He built this to protect you." I nodded, the weight of the ring finally making sense. Outside, the sky was gray, the river below moving steady and slow. I took the stairs instead of the elevator and walked back to Harlan's old truck, the keys still on my ring. They showed up 2 days later. I was fixing the west fence when I heard the tires crunch on gravel. When I turned, their car was already parked at the gate. Mason stepped out first, shoes too clean for the mud he was standing in. Delora followed, sunglasses perched on her head, like she was arriving for brunch instead of a confrontation. "We need to talk," she called out, her voice syrupy smooth. I didn't answer, just kept my hand on the fence post, letting the silence answer for me. "We were trying to give you space," she said, stepping closer. "Let the dust settle." Mason wasn't smiling. "You're making this harder than it has to be, Cale." I straightened slowly, wiping my hands on my jeans. "You don't belong here." Delora's tone softened. "You're still young. You don't understand what that kind of money does to people. We can help." "You already did," I said. "You helped by leaving." Mason moved past her. "Listen to me, boy. You think you're ready for this? You're not. This land, that company, it'll bury you." I looked at him. For a second, just one, I felt it. That small voice that still wanted to be told I wasn't alone, that maybe they'd changed, that maybe despite everything I still wanted to hear them say I'd done well. But then Delora said it. "Let us help, before you ruin everything he built." It snapped clean through me. "You mean before I keep what he built out of your hands?" She flinched. Mason took a step forward. "You go to the press and they'll believe us. They'll say you manipulated a sick old man, that you shut out your own parents." I stared at him. My fingers curled into fists. "Try it," I said. "Tell them how you forged documents a decade ago. Tell them how you left me on a porch without saying goodbye. Tell them how you only came back when the will got read." Delora stepped forward again, hand reaching for my arm. I stepped back. "Stop pretending this is about family. You didn't come for me. You came for the fortune. Mason's voice dropped. You think this is over? No, I said. I think it's just beginning. But I'm not afraid of you anymore. He studied me for a long second, then turned. Delora hesitated, looked like she wanted to say something else, but didn't. They got in the car and drove off, the dust kicking up behind them like smoke from a dying fire. I stood there for a while, breathing hard, the wind tugging at my sleeves. Then I walked back to the porch, sat down, and stared at the field. My hand rested on the ring. The fire they'd started wasn't burning here anymore. Not where they left it. Not where I'd built something stronger. I never sold the farm. People asked some kindly others with numbers on paper, but I kept it. Not because of the land or the house or even the memories. I kept it because it was where everything started, where I became more than who they left behind. It took a year to build the foundation. I used part of Harlan's estate and called it Henry's Hope. I wanted it to be more than scholarships. I wanted it to be a place where kids like me, lost, dropped off, underestimated, could find something steady beneath their feet. The first year we had 7 students, all of them orphans, all of them wary. We built simple robots together, soldered wires, and fumbled through diagrams just like I had in the shed. One of them, a quiet girl named Rhea, never spoke more than a sentence for weeks. But her hands were steady, and her code was clean. She's our lead engineer now. I still drive Harlan's truck, still keep the same workbench in the shed, and the ring, his ring, still sits on my finger, the word legacy, worn faint but clear. One evening I opened a letter from a boy named Miles. He was 12. He'd just finished our beginner program and wanted to join the next level. He wrote, I'm not sure if I'm smart enough, but I want to build something real. Is that allowed? I read the line 3 times. That night, I walked out to the porch and sat where Harlan used to drink his coffee. The stars were out, scattered and quiet. I thought about that boy, about Rhea, about myself at 9, staring at the ceiling of a room I didn't ask for. You don't need permission to matter. That's what I would have told myself back then. I wrote Miles back the next morning. You already built something real, I said. You believed you could. Outline title, they left me with a stranger, then returned for his fortune. Setting, remote countryside town near Missoula, Montana, USA. Main characters. Chapters 8. Average 460 words. Chapter summary. At age 9, Kyle is abruptly left by his parents in front of a weathered farmhouse. They say they need time to settle things. He watches them drive away forever. Tone, abandonment, cold, dread, improvement. Note, use, brief flashback of parents' tension to hint at hidden motives. Hook questions. What if your parents vanished without a single explanation, and what if the man who opened the door wasn't ready for you either? Summary, Cale struggles to adapt, speaking little, but Harlan draws him in gently through small acts, toast, tinkering, and quiet encouragement. The emotional gap begins to close through mechanical work. Tone, hesitant, trust, quiet warmth, improvement. Note, introduce a moment where Kyle lashes out or breaks something out of anger, showing vulnerability. Hook questions. What if your first feeling of home came from fixing something instead of being held? And what if silence was safer than asking why Summary Cale joins a robotics club at Harlan's urging? With mentorship, he wins a state competition at 14. At a backyard celebration, Cale realizes he's building something deeper than machines, a sense of belonging. Tone. Hopeful, determined improvement. Note. Add a moment where Kyle wants to give up, but Harlan refuses to let him walk away. Hook questions. What if the person who believed in you had nothing to gain from it? And what if your first real win wasn't a trophy, but being proud of who you were becoming? Summary. On his 18th birthday, Harlan gives Cale a silver ring engraved with legacy. Over cookies and silence, he finally reveals the truth. Cale's parents tried to forge documents to steal Harlan's wealth. Tone, emotional revelatory improvement. Note, let Harlan show regret, not just about the past, but about shielding Cale from it too long. Hook questions. What if your inheritance wasn't money, but a secret sealed in silver? And what if the truth you feared was already living inside you, a Mary? Harlan dies suddenly. At the funeral, Delora and Mason reappear eerily warm at first, then manipulative. They corner Kyle to discuss what was left behind. Tone tense, disorienting improvement. Note, add sensory details, rain casket, wood cologne to make their reappearance invasive. Hook questions. What if the people who left you only came back for what you were given? And what if the worst kind of mourning is when someone else controls the narrative? Summary at a lawyer's office in Missoula. Kyle learns Harlan left him everything. The ring has biometric verification. His parents explode in protest, but are shut down by ironclad legal proof and their prior guardianship surrender. Tone vindication, controlled power improvement. Note, let Kyle waver. Briefly, he's still 18, but then choose resolve. Hook questions. What if protection didn't come from the law, but from the man who saw this day coming? And what if the thing they mocked a ring was the wall they couldn't break? Summary parents, escalate threats, blackmail, emotional manipulation. Kyle finally confronts them on the property, invoking the truth and daring them to go public. They leave defeated for now. Tone intense, cathartic improvement. Note, insert internal conflict. Kyle almost believes he needs their approval for a second. Hook questions. What if the people who shared your blood never deserved your story? And what if standing your ground didn't look like revenge, but like not backing down? Summary Cale starts a foundation on the farm to teach engineering to orphaned kids, Henry's hope. A girl he mentors becomes chief engineer years later. He still drives the truck, wears the ring. It's no longer about money, it's about the life built after betrayal. Tone, peaceful, legacy-driven improvement. Note. Include one brief letter from a child mirroring Cale's old questions about worth. Hook questions. What if the greatest inheritance wasn't what he left you, but what he prepared you to give? And what if the kid they abandoned became the man who built futures? Let me know if you'd like a text thumbnail or title optimized from this outline next.